career path, challenges, mistakes along the path to career success. Based on this, we've developed this DNA series that takes a look at the career path of senior executives in an effort to provide you with key insights and advice. If you have any questions throughout this presentation, please use the Q&A function in the bottom right and send them directly to myself, the host, or Rowan O'Grady, our presenter. So now, having said that, I'd like to introduce Rowan O'Grady, the Hays Canada President, who will be presenting the key findings of this report, giving you a sneak peek before we launch it officially next week. So I'll pass it over to Rowan.
Thanks. Hi, good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are, and welcome to today's webinar. Today we're launching the first of our DNA series, and this is the DNA of the CFO. So thank you all very much for joining us. I believe we have a large number of people dialed into today's session, and I hope you find it really productive. So as I mentioned, my name is Rowan O'Grady. I'm the President of Hays in Canada. I've been in the specialist recruitment business and with Hays now for 20 years, 8 of those based here in Toronto. The reason behind the idea, the DNA series, was to understand with some certainty what does it take to actually reach the top of your profession in Canada. And as Canada's leading recruiter for the accounting and finance sector, we've got the means and we have the expertise to be able to answer that, and it would appear from the amount of interest that we've had in this project, and we've had a lot of interest in the project, there's a clear demand for the answers, so why not find out? I should also mention here that the insights and the findings here are relevant to anyone with ambitions to progress their management career in finance, whether that actually includes becoming the CFO or not. So what I'm going to show you over the next 20 minutes, it will only take us 20 minutes, is a preview of the full report. We'll have a few minutes at the end to answer any questions you have. As Saya mentioned, just type them into the Q&A function or the chat box, I think. And the full report, I should mention, is out on Monday, April 20th. You can go to hays.ca/DNA to request a copy for yourself. So how do you find out what it takes to become a CFO in Canada? Well, what we did was a couple of different things. We surveyed 150 of Canada's leading CFOs on their qualifications, education, industry experience, challenges, mistakes in their career. And we also did a deep dive analysis of 100 Canadian CFO resumes to get into the real nitty-gritty of their resume, and also to look at how do they actually present themselves, how do they present their skills and qualifications. And finally, we carried out a number of in-depth interviews with Canada's leading CFOs to get their insight and their advice on how they got to where they are today. We've created a short video, actually, from the CFO interviews that we did at Aecon, Canadian Tire, Molson, and Walmart, and that's available now. You can go on to hays.ca/DNA and you can see that video, or at least wait until the webinar is actually over and then go on and have a look at it. The first piece of data that we can share that we'll kick off with is that 95% of CFOs are happy with their career choice. So if you achieve your goal, you will most likely be happy when you get there, which is great news. How the 5%, the remaining 5%, how they got to where they are, but they're unhappy in their career choice, I'm not sure, but there you go. I suppose even CFOs can be unhappy in their job, and that's good to hear. Sometimes it can happen to all of us at some stage, I suppose. So just a little bit about the respondents as some context. The majority of the respondents were from Ontario, BC, or Alberta. Most CFOs got into a career in finance due to either having a passion for it or they felt that they had a talent for finance, and that accounts for about 59% in those two categories. 18% stumbled into it, got into it accidentally, and then a decent proportion, just under 14%, they were attracted to it due to the earning potential of a career in finance. The vast majority are aged between 40 and 60 years old, and then the biggest influence on their career, well, their direct manager seems to have the most impact, which is important to remember for your rising stars in your own team, followed then by an even split on influence between their dad and a work colleague, with their mom having less influence in that area than maybe some of the other areas in their life, but there you go. Interesting point to bear in mind for us, or for you to bear in mind, is the impact that you can have, whether you know it or not, on the people that are working for you and with you. So let's just start off with the essential qualifications and experience and what they are for a CFO. So as I mentioned, we analysed 100 CFO resumes, and we looked at qualifications, designations, skills, experience, and even pastimes we've documented the results in the full report, and I've just posted a little shot from the full report here on the top right of the screen so you can see how it looks. But for now, we've just pulled a couple of the key highlights for you. So we looked at professional designations, and 55% of CFOs were CA qualified, which clearly shows the CA dominance there. But having said that, we've still got 45% with other than the CEO. So it's very much a possibility to make it to the C-suite with a CGA or a CMA. Also interesting was the appearance of the CPA, with 12% showing a CPA designation on the resume. We asked the CFOs through the survey then which designations they saw as being imperative. They could only select one, and again, the CA designation dominated with 47% saying it is imperative. But also very interesting, we've got 23% saying that the CPA was imperative. So when you think about that, let's say we've got only 12% showing the CPA designation on the resume, with 23% saying it is the imperative designation. I would suggest that that probably means that the CPA is gathering traction in the industry. That's going to be something that will become more and more prevalent in the next 5 years. We also looked at skills, experience, and accomplishments, and again, full findings are in the report, but just to highlight a couple of key points here, the vast majority have not progressed in a straight line within the same organization or in the same industry. 70% have worked in multiple industries over their careers, and on that point, the CFOs that we interviewed, particularly for the video piece actually, really highlighted this as a necessity, that is, getting experience in varied industries as opposed to staying in one industry. For example, Dean McCain, who's the CFO at Canadian Tire, he told us that although he is obviously a CFO in retail, his background was actually in construction and in real estate, and he started out, his starting point in his career was actually with a shoe repair company. So the varied experience is definitely an asset. Then on the question of is international experience required, half of the CFOs we looked at have international experience, and in the survey and the interviews that we did, the ones that did, i.e. the CFOs who had international experience, they felt quite strongly that that was one of their key reasons for their own success. After the obvious answers of education and work experience, we asked what was their key selling point, and 67%, the vast majority, believe that this was answered through showing their professional accomplishments. So not just selling the point that they had worked somewhere for X number of years and that they had held whatever position, but actually highlighting what they accomplished there and the specifics of it. And as a professional recruiter myself who makes a living from interviewing people, I would absolutely agree with that statement. Hearing detailed and specific examples of actual accomplishments speaks volumes, and it builds confidence like nothing else really. When we sat down to look at all of the results from the survey and when we read through all of the interviews, there was a couple of key themes that kept coming out. We asked ourselves the fundamental question. We said, based on the findings, what is the absolute key to actually becoming a successful CFO? And we were able to categorize the answers into a few key areas, and there, as you can see here. So first of all, it starts out with the personal career choices that the individual makes. Then, once into a management role, ensuring that that individual has the right people on their team. Next, investing time in the development and improvement of each individual team member, obviously to ensure that the team or the organization is successful. And then finally, and not exclusively, it's almost an umbrella over all of these points, is the topic of leadership. And I'm just going to look at these briefly and individually. So let's start out with the all-important career choices. And I'll start here with something that one of the CFOs said during one of our interviews. He said, I see so many people tying themselves up in knots as they try to navigate from A to B on a specific path. I was much more open to a broad range of experience to see where would that lead me. And I really agree with that statement. I think the idea of planning a route from start to finish seems very unlikely. Plus, from what we've seen here and what I can share with you now, there would appear to be no single path to the CFO role. Having said that, there are patterns and commonalities in how people get there. So first of all, we looked at what was the first role of the various CFOs, and although accountant dominated with 39%, there was still 61% who had a different start to their careers. So 13% were originally analysts, 12% from a payroll background, 10% were auditors. So as I said, there's still no single path to the CFO role, and whether you're coming from a Big Four firm or you're coming from an accounts payable position at the beginning, you've still got a shot at making it to that level. I think what matters more, what's fundamental really, is what you do after your first role. And speaking of which, we also looked at what functional areas our CFOs had experience in, other than the accounting department, and the answer was 100% of them had experience in at least one other functional area. Many would experience in more than one. Over 40% have experience in IT or HR or operations or risk and compliance. And then we've got a not insignificant 20% with experience in property and facilities or procurement. I think the obvious message here is that experience outside of finance is absolutely essential. And just an interesting point on this, a lot of finance professionals that we speak to virtually every day are at that mid to senior level. They're very keen to get experience specifically in operations, and I think if you have that operations experience, it's absolutely a positive point, and I do believe it's an advantage. But having said that, working in operations is not the only way of rounding your experience and skill set. It would appear that from the survey findings that we have there, that having experience in other functional areas such as HR or IT is just as beneficial. In the report, it's not here on this slide, you also see what the role was immediately before becoming the CFO. Again, the answer there is varied, but I believe the financial controller was one of the most dominant ones, and that really shows the basic requirement and the high degree of importance of having sound financial practices under your belt before trying to take on a CFO role, which sounds obvious, but I think it's important to state that. Finally, if you're feeling that you're currently not on the right path, you're in good company. 40% of the CFOs said that they second-guessed their career choices at some stage of their journey, and most commonly, that was typically happening at the middle stage of their career as they were progressing from middle into senior management. As I mentioned, having a crystal ball and forecasting your exact path is almost impossible. I think the advice here is about being open to a range of experiences, and also it's about being patient. The second theme was in the context of actually being in a management or leadership role already, and the importance of then making good hiring decisions and getting the right people on the team. Our CFOs that we spoke to, they really stressed this point, hence the fact that we've categorized it or made it a theme. They really stressed this point, and they stressed the importance of them fitting into the teams that they joined during their careers, but also the importance of actually hiring people who fit into their teams and to their company culture. Or I think as David Smales, who's the CFO from Acon Group, said, as he told us, he said that having the right fit is very important. Every working culture is different, and hiring people that will fit both your office culture and your finance team is essential. So how do you go about recruiting the right people to your team? Well, if you look at, as an example, if you look at how most of the CFOs surveyed got their current role, it's dominated by networking or through a recruitment company. On networking, we see all sorts of variants are used: online, industry events, social media, membership, social events, and 69% saying that networking was very to extremely important to becoming a CFO. So networking obviously a key thing here. And then on the topic of working with a professional recruitment firm to get the right people on the team, I think if you're looking for a recommendation from me, I know a very good specialist recruitment firm, and the logo of that company is at the top left of the screen, just as an aside. Just on this same topic, connected to this, to do with the recruitment part of this, and it's a slight aside on the topic, we're getting asked more and more about recruitment through social media, or even about, how do you have a digital recruitment strategy, which seems to be what this is turning into. So just a very quick point on here. Recruitment online is obviously a lot more now than just posting a job on a job board. As advertising mechanisms continually become an awful lot more advanced, job seekers don't really need to go out and search for the job ad, and the job ad is frequently proactively just coming to them through sophisticated and targeted promotion. And I think that's what the younger generation or Generation Y have come to expect, which means as an employer trying to recruit in this market, really have to bring your jobs to people, which in a nutshell I think is through 3 avenues. It's in social media, it's in your mobile and tablet strategy, and obviously and everything obviously is online. And really the key to this is making sure that all elements of the plan complement each other and that there's consistency throughout. I think my view on this topic is that technology seems to be making or seems to have made having a solid recruitment strategy even more difficult than before. I could talk all day about this, but we do not have the time. So just moving on. The third category, or third theme, was about successfully leading your team by investing in the people on the team. We asked, what was the biggest mistake you've made in your professional career? And the most popular answer to this, 44.5%, was managerial error. Also, people management was listed as one of the most important elements of the CFO role. So how you manage people in your team is essential to your own success, and it's often the most difficult part, as there's rarely black and white answers on people management. So we can just look at this topic from 2 points of view simultaneously. First of all, you can look at it from the perspective of the importance of how to be a better manager of people yourself, and 2, how to help the rising stars and the future leaders in your team, and how do you help them become better managers too. And the respondents really focused on 2 key areas. The first one was the importance of having a mentor in your career. So 26% said they were unsure if they would have achieved their current role without the support of a mentor. So depending on your situation, that could highlight the need to have somebody that you can seek advice from, or the need for you to act as a mentor for the more promising members of your own team. And then the second area that people focused on was the importance of professional development, and this came through loud and clear. So 74% said that professional development was very to extremely important. Again, that could be about ensuring that you are continuing your own professional development, but just as importantly, it's about ensuring that you're actually investing in the professional development of your team members if you're in a management or leadership role. The final theme or category was leadership, and we asked what was the single most important aspect of the role of a CFO, and here is what people said. The top 3 were strategic planning, commercial understanding, and people management. I think all of those can be classified really as leadership skills, and after that, typically, it's more of the technical finance skills. So if you're at the start of your career, I think the message here is the importance of a sound technical financial background and understanding. And if you're at a more advanced stage of your career, I think it shows what the next steps are that you have to take. Gaining that valuable leadership experience in people management, your commercial understanding, planning, should really form part of your own career and development plan. So I'll just finish this with a slide with a quote from Bill Toppelmeyer. He is the CFO for Walmart in Canada, and he told us, today, even at the lower levels of finance, we're screening for future leaders of the company. Who has the stronger talent development skills? Who can collaborate better and implement strategy? They are the key elements that we're looking for in candidates today. So I think that says it all, really. And then just as an extra piece of info on this topic, we also asked what are the top 5 leadership characteristics of a CFO, and the answer seems to be that you need to be a real all-rounder. So being ethical are absolutely fundamental. You can see that dominating, and that makes total sense to the role. But then being collaborative, being goal-oriented and ambitious, obviously, and proactive are very much required too. So it's clearly not a job where just the talent for finance is required. It very much is a leadership role above everything else. So that's pretty much everything on the review of the report. I just wanted to finish here with a short summary and a couple of recommendations from Hayes from our perspective. So our key findings can be summarized as follows. First of all, having a sound financial background and a real understanding of finance is a fundamental basis. Again, it's an obvious point, but a very important one. I think we see people sometimes trying to move towards that leadership role when they haven't absolutely nailed down the fundamentals and understanding of the important elements of the finance function in an organization. Having said that, once that's achieved, a varied and diverse experience is absolutely an advantage. It's almost a requirement. as you start moving towards a senior management role. And then finally, and most importantly, the CFO role is about leadership above everything else. Our recommendations to, if you're an aspiring CFO, or really to anyone looking to progress their management career down the finance path, is simple. The first one being, it's important to develop some form of personal career or development plan, and that's not just to do with what the next role should be. In fact, it's more important that it isn't to do with what the next role should be. It's more to do with an awareness of your own development needs and working out how are you going to make those improvements in the coming year. Secondly, take the time, have the right resources and have the right expertise dedicated to getting the right people on the team. It's absolutely fundamental. And finally, it's absolutely worth your while, and it's impossible to be successful without investing your own time, energy and expertise into your team members, and ensure that you have a succession plan in place and you've got good people coming through the system. So I think I stayed exactly on time there, 20 minutes. We've got a couple of minutes to spare, just to answer any questions that you have. So if you have a question, please type it into, I believe, the chat box. We'll do our best to answer it. I'm available to answer questions. And also we've got Thea Watson, who's our marketing director, who actually ran the research and the survey originally and is very up to speed with the insights into what we found. So as we're waiting for questions, just a couple of other little points. So if you want to request a copy of the full report, go to hayes.ca/DNA. You can view the video there too, or you can go to YouTube at YouTube/Hayes North America. And then we can just see what questions we have. So let's see, what have we got? Okay, so we've got, it might take a couple of minutes, but we've got one, which is a good start. So the first question is, and this is, I don't know whether this person is feeling impatient, but there's a question saying, what's the typical time span that it takes to actually become a CFO? And that's like a good question. I'm not sure if there is a specific time, and whether that's to do with from the beginning of your finance career or once you get into, from when you start to work. But from what we found, we actually did ask this question. We said, how long have you been working by the time you got into the CFO role? And it would appear that 15, 16 years seems to be on average, although I can't say if it's taking you longer than that, that's a bad thing, or if you've achieved it in less than that time, that's quite the achievement, actually. One interesting point, actually, on the research, we noticed that for people who had come from the big four companies, they, on average, were achieving that CFO role about 2 years faster. So there is, although you don't have to come from one of the big firms, it would appear to be some kind of an advantage to coming from that background. We have another question. It says, and let's see, what functional area would you, okay, so the question is, what functional area would you say is most important to get experience in? Yeah, I think, like, obviously one of the messages there is that getting experience in lots of different areas is very good. I think having the commercial understanding and the understanding of the value of the business, the operations of the business, the service that you're delivering to the client, and the costs associated with that is obviously one of the most important aspects of the role, according to the results. Meaning that you've really got to understand all aspects of the business. And we've seen people come through, obviously saying that they've come from an HR background or an IT background, but for the respondents on the survey, 60% said that the most important department to get experience in is in operations. So there you go. So maybe that's the shorter answer, that it's operations, but it could be other areas. So I'm going to have a look. We have other questions coming through. Hi, Ron. Some recruiting firms specialize in junior level roles, others focus on senior level roles. So Hayes have a separate department that focuses on CFOs. Yeah, we actually have, it depends probably on the level of the job, because I think there's a CFO and then there's a CFO. We have an executive search practice that operates for C-level suites on retainer basis, and then we've got a senior finance practice that predominantly works on a contingency basis that may be appropriate for different levels. So yes, either way, we could absolutely help with that. Another question, what resources would you recommend to assist in dealing with difficult employees and upper management that continues to allow their behavior? I'm not sure what resources would you recommend to assist in dealing with difficult employees and upper management that continues to allow their behavior? Yeah, I suppose that isn't particularly to do with CFOs, and I can maybe talk from my own experience on that one. I think that clarity about what the company culture is or what the department culture is an extremely important thing. And I think people are either adding to that culture and strengthening it, or they're taking away from that culture and weakening it. I think if there's somebody in an organization who's clearly not contributing, or worse, at worst, are being destructive, it's a very beneficial and positive move to deal with that behaviour. And I think going down a disciplinary path and actually issuing formal warnings to someone, I think is the right thing to do. And always, and we see this happening all the time, if somebody is moved from a department who was perceived to being destructive, if that person isn't there anymore, then suddenly the feedback from everybody comes out that why didn't this happen earlier, and things are an awful lot better now. So kind of obviously not to do with CFO, but an interesting point. I could talk about that one for quite a while. Next question, is a professional designation a must for a CFO position? What about people with MBA and other financial engineering degrees? That's a great question. I think it's dominant from what we've seen, but at the same time, and I don't have it in front of me, I think Thea could probably see that, there was a percentage of CFOs who came from an MBA background.
I have it here.
Thea, if you could have it.
So 20% have an MBA, and 10% of the respondents said that having the MBA is actually the most important credential to have. So by no means do you have to have a designation. And interestingly, I don't have this right in front of me, but I think about 15 to 20% say it doesn't matter what your education. You have to have some form of education, but it's the business and the experiences that matter most. So it's definitely not a defined career path.
Now, can you tell how many people only had an MBA without an accounting designation?
That was a 20%.
I wonder, there might be 20% have an MBA, but we don't know whether they've got a CA or not, right?
Right. On this.
We might have checked that, actually. It'd be interesting to find out. There's another question. What is the contribution of communication skills, apart from strong technical knowledge, in making a successful CFO? It did come through on one of the most important things. It wasn't in the top 3, communication skills, but it was immediately, once we got beyond strategic planning, commercial understanding, and people management, the next one was working capital / cash flow management, and the next one was communication and presentation. And communication and presentation came in more important than financial analysis, risk management, investor relations, and financial accounting. So I think the answer to that is it has a high degree of communication, and even in general terms, if you think about the message that being a CFO is a leadership role, you could argue that a leadership role is fundamentally about communication. So I think it's absolutely paramount. Another question, are there many job postings for CFOs? What's the demand likely to be over the next 5 years? I think that, again, there's CFO roles and then there's CFO roles. You don't often see the very senior positions being advertised on some of the normal job boards, and they'll go through executive search practices, such as with ourselves. But I think the key to doing that is networking. As we said, it was 69% of CFOs said that networking was most important. So I think networking amongst your peer group, in associations, but also with organizations like ourselves who are spending all day, every day working on that, and finding those opportunities would be an essential thing. Over the next 5 years, in the next 5 years, I would suggest, and we found this when we did our salary guide and market confidence survey in January, the confidence this year in the economy and amongst employers is at an all-time high. I think that this year and coming into next year, we're going to see an uplift, and I would expect that after such a downturn, it's going to be a prolonged period of growth. So I would imagine there will be multiple opportunities come up. How is it best to promote oneself when career profiles include a lot of the credentials that you've presented? So how best to promote oneself when career profiles include it? I think maybe what this question is to do with how to maybe differentiate yourself when a lot of people have got the same credentials. I think that's a great point, actually, and I think that is, to some extent, is the challenge that we've got right now. I think with social media, mobile internet, the job boards, LinkedIn, everything is causing there to be more and more and more traffic and noise out there. So if you're recruiting, if you're an employer recruiting, it's difficult to get your message out there. And if you're an individual looking for a job, it's difficult to differentiate yourself. And I think our answer to that, being in this business, is to try and build a network, which is the starting point, but really it's building the relationships within that network, and can you dedicate the time and effort to building relationships with people, get to know people, so once that individual decides to move, they will move with us, or once that company decides to recruit, they're going to come to us and do the same thing. But yeah, it just seems to get more and more challenging to be able to differentiate yourself all the time. How easy is it for a CFO to transition from a small company to a big company? That's a good question, and I think it depends again on what are we defining as a big company, but I think that is a difficult one. I think you could see someone who is a CFO in a small organization or a startup organization, and they're virtually running the accounting department. You could see a CFO with a publicly traded company, and that person hasn't been remotely closely connected to an accounting department for a number of years, and they're very, very different jobs. I think if you're a CFO with a publicly traded company, then it becomes, you're almost at the mercy of the investors and the presentation of the organization. The role becomes completely different, as well as strategic planning. I think it's a real challenge in the answer to that. I think someone may go from being a CFO in a small company to being a financial controller, maybe a VP finance in a larger company. So you see the CFO's role having to change given the shifting demographic, the younger workforce, more Gen Y and millennials, with different value drivers, including better work-life balance and higher propensity to change jobs and careers to pursue goals. I do, and we experience that all the time ourselves as an employer. We employ 200 people in Canada, and a fair proportion of those people would be Generation Y, I'd say. We did a report on this, and you can find it on hayes.ca. It's called Generation Y, I think, and it is to do with exactly this point. An important point on here, there isn't an enormous change. Like fundamentally, people want to work hard, they want to do well, they do want to be loyal to an organization, but the challenge is the engagement of people. That's what's changing. People want to be engaged with, and they want to be communicated with, and not just told what's happening, they want upward communication as well. So fundamentally what people want in their careers is remaining the same to some extent. It's how we engage with people is the challenge nowadays, and I think that's what a lot of employers are struggling with to some extent. Why the emphasis on Canadian experience is overseas experience irrelevant to Canada? No, I don't think so, but I did touch on that. I think 50% of our CFOs that we surveyed said that they had international experience, 50% just Canadian experience, and as I mentioned, the guys who did have Canadian or overseas experience were very, very confident that that was actually a key to their success. So, no, I absolutely think overseas experience is relevant. I don't think anybody, how many people do we speak to? Well, everybody we spoke to is currently a CFO in a company in Canada right now. So I don't think we spoke to anybody who, or we didn't focus on or target CFOs who were being a CFO in a country overseas, right? So I don't know if that was what the point was being made. But anyway, the question seems to have slowed down, so I think that that's it. And that's probably all the time we have. I didn't want to take up any more of your time. So if you do want to contact us with any other questions, or if we can be of assistance in any way at all, you can contact me. My email address is on the screen, rowan.o'grady, no apostrophe, @hayes.com. Thank you to everybody who's involved in the making of the report. I really like to thank the 4 CFOs from those leading organizations for taking the time to help us with the video. The video is fantastic, and you should go on and look at it. It's insight and advice from 4 people who got to the top of their profession in Canada for leading organizations, and it's excellent advice. So thank you, everybody. Thank you for joining us today, and I hope you find the report useful and constructive.